Why did the laugh linger, even when silence was demanded? It had been years since she first heard it. Not in London, not from some careless tourist mocking a guard, but in a place far more suffocating. The steel echo of a military barracks, recruits lined up shoulder to shoulder, and one of them, a boy who thought the world revolved around him, had laughed. Not out of humor, but out of disbelief. Out of arrogance. The laugh had echoed like a slap cutting into her chest, making her invisible in a room where she was already fighting to be seen. That laugh had never left her. It was like a splinter lodged under the skin of memory. Now, years later, Captain Elena Ward pressed her fingers into the cold metal edge of a briefing table, hard enough that it left a groove against her palm. The tent smelled of wet canvas, diesel, and sand. Around her, officers hunched over satellite imagery, muttering about strike windows, fallback zones, enemy numbers. Their voices layered into a low growl, sharp, efficient, but never once cutting toward her. She stood in uniform, boots planted, jaw steady. She knew better than to fidget, knew better than to speak before they asked. And yet silence was its own weight. The commander glanced her way, a flick of the eyes, a dismissal. It was enough to remind her of the truth. To them, she wasn't essential. She was an assignment, a name on a list, a specialist who had been dropped in because someone in higher command thought she might be useful. That was all. The laugh came back again, that same careless sound from the past. It pressed against her ribs like an accusation. "They will never see you," it whispered. And still she didn't speak, not yet. Because there was something she hadn't told them, something buried, waiting. A truth she carried alone, heavy and sharp, that could change the entire mission if they knew. But she wasn't ready, not yet. The projector flicked, changing the grainy black and white satellite feed to a closer image. A shattered city block, buildings torn open like wounds, streets cracked and covered in debris. The commander's finger stabbed the air above the image. "There, that's the hub. Signals intercepts confirm activity." Murmurs spread. Calculations, questions about resistance, about approach vectors. Elena's eyes stayed locked on the image. Her pulse thudded in her ears. She knew those ruins, knew them too well. A memory slid over her vision like fog. Heat, dust, the weight of her rifle against her cheek, a face through the scope, a man she should have killed years ago, a man she had let slip away. The tent around her seemed to shrink, words blurred. She inhaled slow, steady, clinging to discipline. But the truth was already burning at the back of her throat. She knew the man they were hunting, and he knew her. Her commander's voice cut back into focus. "Ward, you'll take overwatch position here." A pen jabbed against the map to a rooftop. "High vantage, you'll have clean lines." She nodded once, curt, professional, no tremor in her voice when she replied, "Understood." But inside the question rattled, "Will I hesitate again?" A silence stretched after the briefing. The men began to shuffle, gathering gear, trading nervous jokes. She stood still, shoulders squared. Someone brushed past her without looking. Someone else muttered under their breath. Not cruel, not openly hostile, just dismissive. Invisible again. Her fingers twitched near her holster before she forced them still. Her breath caught. The laugh, that ghost of a sound, pressed harder. She thought of her younger brother then, unbidden. How he used to laugh too, but his laugh wasn't cruel. His was light, pure, untainted by arrogance. The laugh of a boy chasing her across a muddy field, before illness caged him in hospital rooms and monitors, before she left for training and never returned in time to say goodbye. The memory sliced through her. She locked her jaw. She wouldn't be that powerless girl anymore. Not here, not now. The meeting ended with a shuffle of papers and a grunt from the commander. No good luck. No make it back. Just orders. Cold, final. Outside, the desert air hit her. Heavy, thick, laced with dust. The sky burned in orange haze, the last light of evening. Soldiers moved in knots, carrying crates, checking weapons, loading trucks. Noise surrounded her, but she felt the quiet inside her bones. Her boots scraped gravel as she walked back toward her station. Each step measured, even, deliberate. She carried the silence like armor. But under that armor, under the discipline, one truth pulsed. She had seen the target before, through a rifle scope, in the silence between orders, and she had chosen not to pull the trigger. The mission tomorrow would demand the shot again. And this time, she didn't know what she would do. The barracks smelled of sweat, gun oil, and damp cloth. She sat at the edge of her cot, rifle across her knees, the weight familiar, grounding. Her fingers moved by memory, checking the chamber, the scope, the trigger pull. Each click, each soft scrape of metal on metal was a heartbeat in her chest. Across from her, Private Lewis fumbled with a small box of rounds, nervous hands shaking just enough to clatter bullets against the floor. He muttered a curse, scooping them back up. "You'll scare the rounds if you treat them like that," Elena said quietly, her voice low, steady. He glanced up, pale eyes wide, then gave a half-smile that didn't reach his face. "Yes, ma'am." She returned to her rifle, cleaning, oiling. Silence settled between them until he pulled a folded photograph from his pocket. He smoothed it out against his knee, staring. A girl with long dark hair smiled out of the paper. "She doesn't even know I'm here," he said, almost whispering. "They told us not to write details. I told her training's still going on, that's it." Elena's eyes flicked to the photo, then back to her rifle. She wanted to say, "That's how you keep her safe." Instead, what came out was quieter. "And does that help you sleep?" He didn't answer. His jaw worked, his throat bobbed. The silence said enough. She nodded once, returned to her work. She knew what silence did. She had lived with it for years. Letters from her mother stacked unopened in a drawer. A father buried without her there to say goodbye. A brother's laugh fading into memory because she wasn't at the hospital when he slipped away. Duty had demanded silence, and silence had taken everything. The oilcloth darkened with grease under her hand. She wiped the last smear, checked the chamber one more time. The weapon gleamed under the dim light. Her eyes lifted, met Lewis for a heartbeat. He looked away first. Outside, thunder rumbled, not storm artillery, distant, waiting. The night stretched on. She lay down at last, rifle within reach. But she didn't close her eyes, didn't sleep. The laugh echoed still. Would she be able to silence it this time, or would it echo forever? Why was she the only one awake when the camp seemed to sleep? The night pressed in heavy. The desert wasn't silent, it never was. Wind hissed against the wire fencing. Somewhere far off, a dog barked, its voice thin and strained against the emptiness. And above it all, the low thud of artillery echoed across the horizon, too far to shake the ground but close enough to remind them that they were living in borrowed peace. Inside the dim barracks tent, most had collapsed into uneasy sleep. The air smelled of sweat and oil, boots and canvas. Shadows hung long from the single bulb overhead. Elena Ward sat on the edge of her cot, boots on, rifle resting across her knees. Her back was straight, shoulders squared as if she were still in formation. Sleep hadn't touched her in years, not really. Not the kind of sleep that carried you under. Her fingers worked the rifle with mechanical grace, cloth sliding across black steel, checking chambers, feeling each edge. Every click of metal sliding home was another heartbeat, another reason to stay awake. She could tell herself it was about discipline, about readiness, but deep down she knew it was about silence, and how silence always came for her when she tried to rest. The flap at the end of the barracks rustled. Private Lewis shuffled in, hair damp with sweat, uniform jacket hanging loose. He was young, too young. His eyes were too pale for this place, too soft, still caught between boyhood and the man he was pretending to be. He carried a small folded square in his hand. Not a weapon, not gear, a photograph. He sat on the cot opposite hers, his boots dragging against the canvas floor. For a while he just held the photo, staring at it in silence. Then, voice low, he spoke. "She doesn't even know I'm here, ma'am." Elena's eyes lifted briefly, then dropped back to her weapon. She didn't want to invite the conversation, but the boy sounded like he needed it. "They told us not to write details," he continued, his words halting like each one had to fight its way out. "So I told her training's still going on. That's it." He turned the photo toward her as if he needed proof that she existed. A girl, dark hair, a smile too bright for the world they lived in. He smoothed the crease where the paper had been folded too many times. "She thinks I'll be home soon." His laugh cracked dry, humorless. Soon. Elena didn't look at the photo for long. Didn't want to. She forced her attention back to the barrel she was polishing, rubbing oil into steel. "And does that help you sleep?" she asked, her voice low, almost flat. The boy's throat bobbed. His jaw worked. He didn't answer. Elena knew why. Because lies didn't help you sleep. They just kept the nightmares at bay until morning, when the light came and burned them back into your chest. She pressed the cloth deeper into the grooves of her weapon, inhaling the metallic tang of oil. The rifle smelled like memory, her memory, different war zones, different years, different silences. Her own family didn't know either, or at least, not everything. Her mother's letters had piled up in her old flat, envelopes unopened, ink waiting like a wound that wouldn't close. Her father had gone into the ground while she was away, her name on a list too important to leave behind. And her brother, her little brother, had faded in a hospital bed. Laughter turned to wheezing breaths, while she was halfway across the world, pulling triggers for people who didn't even say her name when they looked at her. Lewis folded the photo again, pressed it to his lips briefly before shoving it into his pocket. His hands trembled when they dropped to his lap. She noticed but didn't comment. Fear wasn't a weakness here. Fear was human, pretending not to feel it was the real danger. The wind pushed harder against the canvas walls. A hum rattled the tent poles. Elena finished with the rifle, setting the oiled cloth aside. She checked the scope, the glass clean and sharp, adjusted the mount. Every detail mattered, not because she was obsessive, because she had lived with the consequences of imperfection. Her mind drifted, against her will. Years ago, another city, another rooftop. Her scope had found a man's face, a face she couldn't forget. His eyes had met hers through the impossible distance, through the crosshairs. He had been unarmed in that instant. He had looked at her and she had seen more than an enemy. She had seen a father, a survivor, someone human. She hadn't taken the shot. The silence afterward had been deafening. Orders barked in her earpiece. Demands. She hadn't explained, couldn't. She had only said nothing, the same way she always did. That man was alive. She knew it now. She'd seen his image flicker on the satellite feed today, the scar on his jaw, the same eyes. He hadn't disappeared into the shadows of history. He had grown stronger, more dangerous. Her mistake had a name now, and tomorrow she'd be ordered to erase it. Her pulse thudded harder. She closed her eyes briefly, drawing a slow breath. Inhale, exhale, training, discipline, armor. When she opened her eyes again, Lewis was staring at her. Caught, he looked away quickly, but not before she saw the question in his gaze. Not about orders, not about tactics, something deeper. She wondered what he saw when he looked at her. A soldier who had it all under control, or a woman with ghosts pressing against her ribs. "Get some rest," she said finally, her voice softer than she intended. He nodded, lying back onto his cot, but his eyes stayed open, reflecting the dim bulb overhead. Elena leaned forward, elbows braced on her knees, rifle balanced across her thighs. Her fingers tightened on the grip until her knuckles paled. Outside, thunder rolled again. Not weather, not storm, the distant percussion of a war waiting for them. She sat until the bulb flickered, until the shadows grew long, until the camp fell deeper into silence. But she didn't close her eyes, couldn't. Because every time she tried, she saw that face through the scope again. The man she hadn't killed. The man who would be waiting for her tomorrow. What if hesitation cost lives? The engine started before the sun had fully risen. Low growls in the desert, vibrations that rattled through the sand like a warning. Trucks lined up in staggered formation, their metal frames already coated with dust from winds that never stopped blowing. Soldiers moved in shadows, helmets tucked under arms, rifles slung across chests, voices low and clipped. Elena Ward climbed into the back of the lead truck. The canvas canopy stretched above her head, ribs of metal arching like a skeleton. She sat against the wall, rifle laid across her lap, knees bent tight. Beside her, two men joked too loudly, trying to drown their nerves in laughter. It didn't work. The sound was brittle, breaking with each sentence. She closed her eyes briefly. The hum of the engine vibrated through her spine. It was steady, mechanical, predictable, unlike the human heart, unlike the chaos waiting ahead. Across from her, Private Lewis clutched his pack like it might anchor him in place. His lips moved faintly, a prayer maybe, or just words to keep himself from unraveling. She didn't interrupt. She respected rituals. Everyone had their own way of bargaining with fear. The truck lurched forward, gravel crunching under heavy tires. The convoy rolled out, a long line of machines carrying fragile bodies toward a city that didn't want them. Dust swirled, coating everything. Elena's tongue tasted grit with every inhale. She adjusted her scarf higher across her mouth, eyes narrowing against the sting. The desert morning painted the sky in orange and bruised purple, but the beauty felt wrong here, like a stage too grand for what they were about to do. Minutes stretched into an hour. Conversation died. The only sound was the grind of engines and the occasional cough of a soldier who couldn't clear the dust from his throat. Then the city rose ahead of them. At first it was just a jagged silhouette, but as they drew closer, detail sharpened. Buildings ripped open by blasts, concrete slabs stacked at impossible angles, windows shattered into hollow eyes. The streets were empty, too empty, the kind of silence that screamed trap. The convoy slowed. Tires crunched glass and rubble. The air changed, too. Gone was the clean dryness of desert wind. Here the air carried smoke, old iron, and something rotting beneath the heat, a sickness that clung to the back of the throat. "Eyes up," the driver muttered, though nobody had needed reminding. Elena gripped her rifle tighter, scanning rooftops, alleys, every shadow. Movement flickered once, a curtain shifting too quickly, and her heart punched hard in her chest. But when she lifted the scope, the window was empty. The truck stopped abruptly. Soldiers braced, rifles up, silence, only dust rising. The commander's voice crackled through the radio. "Dismount, secure perimeter." Boots hit the ground, loud against the unnatural quiet. Elena stepped down last, her eyes never leaving the jagged skyline. Every angle felt like a rifle barrel aimed at her back. Her boots pressed against cracked stone, crunching glass. She adjusted her pack, checked the weight of her weapon, and fell into step with the others. They moved through the street like shadows, each soldier overlapping fields of fire. Each turn of a corner another held breath. The city was a graveyard. Graffiti marked walls in languages she couldn't read, colors faded under layers of dust. A child's toy lay crushed against a doorway, a shoe without its pair, signs of life abandoned in panic. Elena's pulse thudded harder with each step. The air tasted of tension, bitter and metallic. A shout from the rear broke the silence. "Contact!" Everyone froze, rifles snapping upward, barrels aimed in every direction. Elena's breath stilled. She swept her scope across the rooftops, the alleys, the shadows. Nothing. Only the echo of fear ricocheting through the street. "False alarm," someone muttered, voice tight. They moved again, slower now, every bootfall deliberate. The target building rose ahead, taller than the rest, its frame scarred but still standing. It leaned like a weary soldier refusing to collapse. Windows blackened by soot stared down like empty sockets. Elena's eyes locked on it, her chest constricted. Memory surged, unbidden. She was back on another rooftop years ago, rifle steady, crosshairs lined on a face she knew too well. His eyes had met hers across the impossible distance, calm even then. She had hesitated, and in that hesitation he had slipped away. Now she was standing in the street below that same face's new fortress. The commander's voice cut through her thoughts. "Ward, rooftop, overwatch, you know what to do." She nodded once, no tremor in her expression, though her pulse pounded against her ribs like a drum. Her boots found the stairwell of a half-collapsed building. Each step groaned under her weight, dust raining from the ceiling. She moved carefully, rifle close, scanning every shadow. Rats skittered across broken tiles, vanishing into cracks. The smell of mildew and rot grew stronger the higher she climbed. At the top, the rooftop spread wide, broken but serviceable. She crouched low, laid her rifle along the crumbling edge, scope angled toward the target building. The city stretched below her like a corpse, ribs of concrete jutting against the sky. Her breath slowed, trained discipline guiding her body into stillness. She adjusted the scope, glass catching faint sunlight. The crosshairs lined on the black windows. Silence. But her chest still carried the question like a live round. Would she hesitate again? Her finger flexed against the trigger guard, not yet curling, not yet ready. The radio crackled softly in her ear. Voices below, orders, movement. Her team was inside. She exhaled slow, steady. The city didn't move, but the memory did, the face she had spared. The man who had seen her once and lived. He was inside that building. She knew it as surely as she knew her own heartbeat. And when the moment came, when her scope found him again, she wouldn't be able to hide behind silence. She would have to choose. The city was too quiet. Elena lay prone on the rooftop, her cheek pressed against the rifle stock, breath measured, scope fixed on the dark windows of the target building. The wind shifted, carrying dust and the faint metallic tang of something burned long ago. Every second felt like an inhale she couldn't release. Below, her team moved like cautious shadows, pressing along walls, stacking at doorways, each step deliberate. She tracked them in her scope, then swept back to the black voids above. And then it came. A sound so foreign it didn't belong in that graveyard city. Laughter. Faint at first, carried on the wind, but sharp. Not joyous, not human in the way laughter should be. It echoed against shattered walls, bouncing through alleys until it felt like it came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Every soldier froze. Boots stilled, rifles rose, eyes flicked to corners. The radio crackled with hushed curses. Elena's pulse slammed. Her scope swept rooftop to rooftop, windows to shadows, searching for the source. Nothing. Only broken stone and silence, except the laughter that lingered like a ghost. It wasn't one laugh. It was layered. First a man, then another, then a higher pitch, almost a child. Twisted together, rising and fading, taunting. Her throat dried. This wasn't battlefield chaos. This was theater. Someone wanted them unsettled. The commander's voice hissed through the radio. "Ward, pinpoint it now." She adjusted dials, focused hard. A flicker movement in the window of the target building. A silhouette leaning, head cocked unnaturally, like listening to a joke no one else could hear. Her finger tightened on the trigger. Then the silhouette stepped back, vanished. Her lungs seized. The laughter cut off, abrupt, like someone flipping a switch. The silence that followed was worse. The team reached the building's base. They stacked along the wall, rifles raised, eyes sharp. A breaching charge was set against the warped metal door, hands pressed ears. Countdown. Elena's scope locked on the door, her finger brushing the trigger guard. 3, 2, 1. The blast tore the silence apart. Shrapnel burst outward, dust plumed, echoes rolled through the dead streets. The team flooded inside, rifles sweeping. Elena's heart pounded in rhythm with their boots. She swept her scope to upper windows, searching for muzzle flashes, movement, anything. Nothing. Radio chatter spilled fast, clear left, hallway secured, 2 doors locked. Then another sound. From deep inside the building, faint but sharp. A slow clap. 1, 2, 3. Mocking precise. Elena's chest locked, her scope froze on a black window. And then she saw him. The man she had spared years ago, the ghost she carried in her chest. He stepped into the faint light of a blown-out frame, his body calm, posture controlled. He wore no mask. He wanted to be seen. His face was older now, more weathered but unmistakable. The same eyes that had stared into hers through a scope across another battlefield. Eyes that had memorized her hesitation. He smiled. A cold, deliberate smile. Her finger hovered on the trigger. Just one motion and it would end. The crosshairs sat dead center on his chest. But he didn't flinch. He didn't hide. He raised his arms, palms open, as though welcoming her back into a memory only they shared. And then he began to laugh. Not loud, not manic, quiet, steady, with a certainty that shook her more than any bullet could. Her chest burned. She heard her own pulse more than his voice, but still the laughter carried. It reached her through stone, through scope, through memory. The radio flared. "Ward, do you have visual? Report." She didn't answer, couldn't. The man in the window tilted his head, as if listening for her voice too. Then he pressed a finger to his lips, mocking secrecy. Below, her team was climbing stairs, boots pounding, rifles raised. They were walking into him, into whatever trap he had crafted. She knew it. Her breath came fast, shallow. Her finger trembled on the trigger. If she fired now, maybe she could end it, end him, end the shadow that haunted her every mission. But memory snapped back, the last time she'd seen him, crosshairs on his chest, hesitation, and the choice that had let him slip away. Her throat constricted. Was she repeating it? Was this the moment that defined everything? A shout erupted in the radio. "Contact, top floor." Gunfire burst inside. Muzzle flashes lit broken windows. Screams of command cut through static. Elena's scope locked back on the man. He didn't move. He stood in the window, smiling as gunfire thundered below him. And for one devastating second, she thought she saw recognition in his gaze. Not anger, not fear, recognition. Like he knew she was here, like he had been waiting for her. Her finger tightened, breath stilled. One pull, that was all it would take. The trigger's weight pressed back against her skin, begging. But something inside her froze. Because she realized this wasn't just about ending him. This was about answering the question she had carried for years. What kind of soldier was she? The kind who killed because she must, or the kind who let hesitation define her fate? The laughter still echoed. Not his lips now, but in her chest, in her memory, like it had rooted itself inside her. The radio screamed again. "Ward, take the shot." Her crosshairs wavered, her breath locked. And for one suspended heartbeat, time froze. Why didn't she move? The crosshairs trembled against his chest. Her breath was steady enough, the distance perfect, the window framed as though fate had aligned every variable. And yet, her finger remained frozen, locked against a choice that should have been instinct. The voice in her ear was fire now. "Ward, take the shot. Do you copy? Take the..." She muted the channel. The silence pressed in. It was just her and him now. The man in the window, the ghost. His smile lingered, quiet, unshaken, as if he already knew she wouldn't pull the trigger. His arms lowered slowly, deliberately, until his hands rested at his sides. Then he leaned just slightly into the light. And whispered something. No sound reached her, not at this distance, but she could see the shape of his lips. A word, maybe two. Her pulse surged as her mind scrambled to read them. Her name. She was certain of it. Elena. Her stomach turned to ice. He knew her, not just the sniper, not just the soldier, her name. The one thing she had kept buried beneath layers of duty, silence, and sacrifice. Her cheek pressed harder into the rifle stock. Her breath hitched. She tried to steady it, but it came in short bursts. Her finger curled tighter on the trigger. The rifle was ready to sing. And still nothing. Because she realized in that brutal second, he wasn't afraid of dying. He was daring her to end what she had started years ago, daring her to prove that she could. And she didn't know if she could. Not anymore. Gunfire rattled inside the building. Boots pounded, shouts erupted, echoes bouncing down hallways. She could hear her team struggle, their urgency, their desperation. And yet she stayed locked on him, pinned by the weight of history and memory. He raised one hand almost lazily and tapped his temple, a gesture. Like he knew where she was. Her stomach lurched. How could he know? Unless he had always known. Unless this entire setup, the laughter, the clapping, the performance, had been for her. The realization struck harder than any bullet. This wasn't a trap for her team. It was a message. For her. Her breath collapsed in her chest. And in that frozen instant, she understood something terrifying. This wasn't going to end here. Not tonight. Not with one shot. Because if she killed him now, she would never learn why he had spared her then. Never understand why, out of all the soldiers he could have taken, he let her live. The choice clawed at her. Take the shot, end the ghost, save her team. Or hold it, risk everything, but maybe finally know the truth. The rifle bucked against her shoulder. Her body had made the choice before her mind did. But the bullet didn't hit him. The crack thundered through the ruins, glass shattered from the window frame, but the man had already stepped back, disappearing into the darkness. She missed. Or maybe she had chosen to miss. Her heart slammed as she pulled back from the scope, breath ragged, pulse screaming in her throat. Ward, report. The radio blared again, voices panicked now, thick with static. Top floor, multiple contacts, we're pinned, we need cover fire. She slammed the channel open, guilt searing her chest. Copy, I've got you, hold position. Her scope swept the windows, searching for movement, for muzzle flashes. Figures appeared in the glass, armed, masked, leaning rifles out to cut her team apart. Elena's finger didn't hesitate this time. Crack, one down. Crack, another fell. Crack, a third collapsed against broken stone. Her breathing steadied as each shot landed, her team's shouts filling the radio. They surged upward, clearing rooms, fighting back momentum. But the man, the ghost, was gone. And with him, the question that now burned deeper than any wound. Why had he spoken her name? She pulled back from the scope, eyes burning, hands trembling. For the first time in years, she felt something heavier than duty pressing on her chest. Doubt. The team's voices buzzed in her ear, distorted by static, but her mind was already somewhere else, trapped between past and present. The last time she'd seen him alive, years ago, he had been within her sights just like tonight. She had spared him then, and now. Had she spared him again? Or had he let her? Her hands shook as she dismantled the rifle, sliding it back into its case with motions that felt mechanical, detached. Around her, the city stayed silent, save for the distant echo of her team pushing through the upper floors. But she couldn't shake the sound of his laughter. Not echoing from stone now, but from inside her skull. She closed her eyes, forcing a breath. And saw him again, that smile, that whisper her name. She wanted to scream, but nothing came. Just silence, heavier than the dust settling over the ruins. She whispered to herself, almost too quiet to hear. Why me? The words slipped into the night, unanswered. Below, her team regrouped, voices firm, adrenaline masking fatigue. They'd secured the building, found caches of weapons, scattered documents, signs of a network bigger than they had thought. But no sign of him. Her commander's voice cut through the comms, measured, steady. Ward, report status. She swallowed hard, forced steel into her voice. Sniper nest secure, no casualties, enemy withdrawn. The words tasted like ash, half-truths wrapped in soldiers' steel. Because she hadn't told them the most important part. That the ghost was alive, that he knew her, that he wanted her to know he knew. And worse, that she had let him walk away. Again. The silence between her breaths felt like betrayal. She should tell them, she should confess, but something stopped her. Because deep down, a truth she didn't want to face was carving itself into her chest. She wasn't ready to kill him, not until she knew why he hadn't killed her. Not until she knew why he was laughing. Why did she lie? The question gnawed at her as the helicopter blades thundered overhead, lifting the team out of the ruins. Dust swirled, grit stung her skin, but none of it felt real. Her ears buzzed with the ghost of laughter, her chest heavy with the memory of his smile. The others sat strapped in around her, faces blank with exhaustion, eyes dulled by hours of tension. Lewis slumped with his helmet half off, murmuring about his fiancée waiting back home. Collins pressed a rag to his arm where shrapnel had kissed skin, jaw clenched but pride intact. The commander studied maps even in the chaos of flight, as though clarity could be forced by will alone. And Elena, she kept her gaze fixed on the rifle case at her feet. The steel latches gleamed faintly under the red cabin lights, an accusation. Her finger twitched. She could still feel the phantom pull of the trigger, could still see the man vanish into shadow instead of falling to the ground where he should have. She had failed. No, worse, she had chosen. The commander's voice cut through the drone of the rotors, sharp and direct. Ward, walk me through your engagement, that window. Every head turned slightly, not accusatory, just curious, but the weight of their eyes pressed down like chains. Her throat dried. She forced steel into her voice. 3 hostiles engaged, all neutralized before they could fire on you, building secure. He studied her for a long beat, his jaw flexed, eyes unreadable in the red light. Finally, he nodded once, returning to his maps. The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. Her stomach twisted. They trusted her. They had always trusted her, the sniper who didn't miss, the one who covered them from shadows, who held the high ground, who saw everything. But not tonight. Not him. Her gaze dropped again to the case. The rifle felt heavier now, like the weight of every hesitation she had ever carried had fused into steel. And for the first time since she had joined the unit, she felt a crack inside, a fracture. Because she hadn't told them. She hadn't told them that the man they were chasing, the man orchestrating laughter and traps, wasn't faceless to her. He wasn't just another name on a list. He was the ghost she had spared years ago. And now he knew her name. Her lips pressed tight, holding back words that burned to escape. She couldn't tell them, not yet. If she did, everything would change. Doubt would infect the team. Questions would unravel trust, and trust in their world was oxygen. But silence came with a cost. Her eyes stung. She blinked hard, forcing the tears back, but one thought whispered louder than the rotors, louder than the radio static, louder than anything. Maybe this is my fault. The base loomed hours later, floodlights cutting through darkness, concrete walls rising like a fortress against an unforgiving sky. The team unloaded, weary but alive. Laughter cracked among them now, thin but real, relief spilling through exhaustion. Elena walked apart, rifle case in hand, boots heavy on the tarmac. She didn't join the laughter, she couldn't. Inside the barracks, the world narrowed. Boots off, gear stripped, the smell of oil and sweat clinging to every surface. Men collapsed into bunks, some already snoring, others nursing wounds or trading quiet stories. She slipped away to the armory. The room smelled of gun oil and cold steel, lined with racks of rifles, pistols, spare magazines. Fluorescent light hummed overhead, harsh and sterile. She set the case on a bench, opened it, and stared at the rifle. The barrel gleamed faintly. The scope still bore the faint smear of dust from the rooftop. She reached out, brushing it with her thumb, and felt the weight of memory crash in. She was no longer in the armory. She was back there, years ago. A different battlefield. The first time she had seen him. The memory snapped sharp and brutal. Smoke hung low over shattered homes, gunfire echoing in waves. She had been younger then, new to the unit, her hands steadier in training than in the real thing. The scope had framed him perfectly, a figure moving among civilians, weapons slung but not raised. Her orders had been clear: eliminate. But something in his face, something had stopped her. Not fear, not rage, just calm. Like he already knew the choice she would make. She hadn't pulled the trigger. And he had walked away. That hesitation had branded itself into her. Every shot after, every mission carried its shadow. And now it had returned, flesh and blood, with her name on his lips. Her hand trembled against the rifle. "Ward!" The voice snapped her back. Lewis stood in the doorway, helmet under his arm, fatigue etched deep in his eyes. He offered a half-smile, weary but kind. "You good?" She forced a nod. "Fine." He studied her for a beat, then shrugged lightly. "You don't talk much after missions. Always wondered if it's easier, carrying it that way, or harder." His words struck deeper than he knew. He turned, heading for the bunks, but paused. "Hey, for what it's worth, none of us would be standing if it weren't for you up there." Then he left. The silence closed in again. Her chest tightened. His kindness felt heavier than accusation, because if he knew the truth, if any of them knew, those words would turn to ash. She leaned against the cold steel bench, pressing her palms into it until her arms shook. She wanted to scream, to confess, to unload the secret clawing at her chest. But she didn't. Because soldiers didn't bleed weakness into the open. Not here, not now. Instead, she whispered again, just like on the rooftop. "Why me?" The fluorescent lights hummed back, indifferent. She closed the case, locked it, and walked out. But she knew, with a clarity that burned in her bones, her silence wouldn't hold forever. Because the ghost knew her name. And sooner or later, her team would know too. Why was the silence heavier than the gunfire? The base had settled into its uneasy rhythm, boots on concrete, the clang of metal doors, the drone of distant generators. But for Elena, every sound was muffled, swallowed by the echo of one truth she hadn't spoken. The ghost was alive, and she had let him live. The morning came with orders. Another mission, another target. This time, an arms convoy moving through the mountains. Intelligence suggested it was guarded but not impenetrable, a chance to cut supply lines before they reached the city. Briefings spilled maps across tables, red circles marking ambush points. Voices rattled strategies, contingencies, fallback plans. Elena sat at the edge, silent, eyes sharp but distant. "Ward!" The commander's tone snapped her back. His eyes locked on hers. "You'll take Overwatch, same as always. Ridge line here," he tapped the map. 2 clicks out. Your job is to keep their heads down if they break formation." She nodded, automatic. But inside, unease churned. Because maps and orders didn't erase the truth. Didn't erase the fact that their enemy knew her. That his laughter still carried in her chest. That his shadow was moving somewhere just beyond the reach of these maps. And she hadn't told them. The convoy came at dusk. The mountains bled into long shadows, the air thin, sharp with cold. Elena lay prone against the ridge, rifle anchored, scope scanning the winding road below. The convoy appeared like a serpent, trucks armored with plates, headlights dimmed, armed escorts on foot. Her team lay in wait along the rocks below, bodies pressed into dust, rifles ready. "Ward status." She exhaled slow. Visual on convoy, 7 vehicles, 10, maybe 12 armed. Static crackled. Copy on your call. She steadied her scope, sweeping each vehicle, each guard. Training carried her hands, but her mind was elsewhere. What if this was another performance? Another stage set not for the mission, but for her. Her stomach knotted, she shook the thought, focus, duty first. And yet, her eye froze on the third vehicle. A face in the backseat. Shadowed by the window but visible enough. Calm, steady, watching the road like it belonged to him. Her chest locked. Him. The ghost. Her finger twitched against the trigger. It couldn't be coincidence. He wasn't just haunting ruins, he was here, leading supply lines, watching the ambush unfold like a conductor. And worse. He turned his head. Right toward a ridge. As if he knew exactly where she lay. Her breath caught, her pulse thundered. He smiled. The radio hissed. Ward on your call. Her throat tightened. One pull, just one. She could end him now. Before the convoy reached the kill zone, before her team lit the ambush, end the shadow that had followed her since her first hesitation. But her chest rebelled. Her mind screamed. If she fired now, if she killed him, she would never know. Never know why he had spoken her name. Never know why he had spared her then. And so she froze. Again. The convoy rolled closer. Boots scuffed below. Her team waited for her word, trusting her scope, her judgment. And she gave it. Execute. The mountains erupted. Explosives tore the lead vehicle apart, fire splitting the dusk. Gunfire rattled, shouts echoed, boots pounded across stone. Her team surged from shadows, rifles blazing, cutting escorts before they could regroup. Elena fired 2 cracking shots from the ridge, dropping guards as they scrambled for cover. Her scope danced, steady, precise. She anchored her team's assault with cold steel rhythm. But the third vehicle, the one where he sat, her scope flicked back empty. The door hung open. He was gone. Her chest caved. She scanned frantically, scope darting left, right, sweeping rocks, searching shadows. But he had vanished, swallowed by the mountains as though he had never been there. Below, the fight raged. Her team pressed hard, clearing vehicles, pulling documents, securing the convoy. Voices shouted triumph through the radio. But her chest felt hollow. Because she knew. This wasn't victory. It was another message. Back at base, the debrief spilled numbers, weapons seized, documents recovered, a convoy destroyed. A mission labeled success. But not for her. She sat apart again, silent, the others, laughter grating against the weight in her chest. Lewis nudged her shoulder lightly. You're always the ghost up there, huh? Never miss. You probably saved us all again. She forced a nod. The guilt pressed deeper. Because tonight, her silence had almost cost them. If she had spoken, if she had told them the truth, maybe they would have seen the trap sooner. Maybe they would understand why their enemy seemed to anticipate every move. But she hadn't. She carried it alone. Later, alone in her bunk, she stared at the ceiling, the hum of generators leaking through the walls. Sleep refused her. Every time her eyes closed, she saw his face in the window and the vehicle in her scope, always smiling, always waiting. Her chest tightened. Maybe he wasn't trying to kill her. Maybe he was trying to break her. And it was working. She pressed her palms to her face, breath sharp, whispering words that would never reach another soul. Why me? Why won't you let me go? The silence answered, heavy, indifferent. She turned to the wall, eyes burning, and realized something terrifying. If she didn't tell them soon, if she didn't confess the truth about him, about her hesitation, about the name he whispered, she wouldn't just lose herself. She would lose them too. The weight of silence had become heavier than gunfire. And sooner or later, it would kill her. The silence could no longer hold. It pressed against Elena's chest, thick and suffocating as the bass lived and breathed around her. Boots marched, radios hissed, engines roared in the hangars. To anyone else, life inside the wire went on. To her, it felt like standing in a room filling with smoke, every breath thinner than the last. And she knew, if she stayed silent any longer, she'd choke on it. It began with the commander's voice. "Ward, my office." A summons direct, unmistakable. She rose from her bunk, movements heavy, and followed the narrow corridors until she stood at his door. Inside, the air was sharp with stale coffee and paper, maps pinned to walls, a clock ticking loud against silence. He gestured her in. His eyes studied her as if he already knew. "Close the door." She obeyed. He leaned forward across his desk. "You've been distracted." Her throat locked. She tried to form words, but nothing came. He didn't wait. "On the ridge before the ambush, you hesitated." Her chest tightened. She wanted to deny it, to blame the dust, the distance, anything, but his eyes pierced through. And so, for the first time, she spoke. "He's alive." The words cracked raw, but once they escaped, they could not be pulled back. The commander stilled. "Who?" She swallowed hard, voice trembling. "The man from the ruins, the one I should have shot. He spoke my name. He smiled. I froze." His silence stretched long, heavy. "He was in the convoy," she added, whispering. "I saw him. He saw me. He knew where I was. He's not just surviving, he's watching." The commander's jaw flexed. "Why didn't you report this earlier?" Her voice broke. "Because I was afraid, because I don't know what he is. Because part of me," she faltered, choking the words, "part of me needed to know why." The silence hung. Finally, the commander leaned back. His tone hardened. "This changes everything. If he's alive, if he knows you, then every mission we run is compromised." Elena lowered her eyes, shame burning. "I know." He stood, packing. "We hunt him, we end him. But this time, Ward, you don't freeze. You take the shot. You hear me." Her chest tightened. She nodded. But deep inside, fear whispered, "And if I can't?" The hunt began before dawn. Intel traced radio chatter to an abandoned village high in the mountains, a skeleton of stone where smugglers and warlords often staged meetings, a perfect hiding place for a man who moved like smoke. The team geared up in silence, tension thick. Weapons checked, radios tested, eyes sharper than usual. They trusted Elena's rifle, her eyes, her steadiness. But if they knew the truth, if they knew she had already failed once, would they still? They moved out under pale light, shadows stretching long across dust. Vehicles carried them as far as the road allowed. Then Boots carried them further, climbing rock and ruin until the ghost's lair loomed ahead. A village of broken walls, empty windows staring like sockets, silence deep enough to crush bone. They spread through it carefully, rifles sweeping, eyes searching, every corner a question, every shadow a threat. Elena climbed a shattered balcony, rifle cradled, scope sweeping the horizon. And there he was. Not hiding. Standing in the open courtyard, as though he had been waiting all along. The same calm presence, the same stillness, his rifle slung but unused, his eyes locked on hers. And yes, he smiled. Her chest knifed. She drew breath sharp, finger hovering near the trigger. One squeeze and it would end. But his voice carried, low, even across the broken stones. "Ward." Her stomach twisted. He spoke her name like it belonged to him. The team froze, rifles trained, waiting for her shot. The commander's voice hissed in her earpiece. "Take him." Her finger trembled. The ghost raised his hands, slow, deliberate, but his eyes never wavered. "You should have killed me then, but you didn't, you still can't." Her breath faltered. "Why?" she whispered, though no one else could hear. He tilted his head, as if studying her soul. "Because you're not like them. because hesitation means you still have something human left. The words struck deeper than bullets. "Don't listen," the commander barked in her ear. "Ward, end this." The ghost stepped closer. "They'll use you until you're empty, until hesitation is gone, until all that's left is silence." Her chest ached, her scope blurred with tears she refused to let fall. The team shifted, uneasy, fingers on triggers. One wrong twitch and the courtyard would drown in gunfire. Her finger pressed against steel. One pull, that was all. Duty demanded it, her commander demanded it, her team's lives demanded it. But her soul rebelled. And for one suspended heartbeat, time froze. She saw two worlds. In one, she pulled the trigger. The ghost fell. Her silence ended, but at the cost of a question that would haunt her forever. In the other, she lowered the rifle. The ghost lived. The war continued. But the question remained alive, too. She had seconds to choose. The commander's voice thundered. "Ward now." Her breath steadied, her hands stilled. And she chose. The rifle cracked. The ghost staggered. His smile flickered, then faded. He collapsed into the dust, eyes still locked on hers. Not anger, not fear, something else. Acceptance. The courtyard fell silent. The team surged forward, securing the body, sweeping the ruins, confirming what her bullet had done. The commander's voice cut through the radio, steady, sharp. "Target neutralized. Good work." "Good work." The words rang hollow. Elena lowered her rifle, chest hollow, eyes burning. She had done her duty. She had silenced the ghost. But the silence inside her did not ease. It grew heavier. Because the truth was not victory. The truth was that she hadn't pulled the trigger for the mission, or for her team, or for her commander. She had pulled it for herself. To silence the question. To end the weight of hesitation. And yet, even as the dust settled, she knew the silence would never end. Not really. It would follow her home, into sleep, into every shadow, because once a ghost had spoken her name, and for a moment she had believed him. That night back at base, the laughter of others felt distant. The celebration of a mission completed did not reach her. She sat alone, rifle beside her, staring into the dark. Her reflection whispered, raw, steady, a voice that would never leave her now. Sometimes the silence is what saves you. Sometimes it's what buries you. And though she had killed the ghost, his shadow lived on. Not in the mountains, but inside her.